Imagine you've just received a message that an old friend is visiting your city. Although you were very close in school, you haven't seen her in over 10 years. Rika Okada was so excited to catch up with her good friend that she posted about it on her Facebook page. However, things were not as they seemed, and only 4 months later, Rika was dead. Today, we're heading to Japan, the land of the rising sun, to talk about the case of Rika Okada. On the whole, as we grow up, life seems to get busier and a bit more complicated. What with work commitments, family responsibilities and the like, it's easy to fall out of contact with people we don't meet in our daily lives. Friends who were once close growing up, through school or college, move away or drift apart, and often years go by without any personal contact. But occasionally, once in a while, a person you haven't seen or heard from in years reaches out. This is exactly what happened to 29-year-old Rika Okada in 2014. She was surprised to receive a message online and out of the blue from her childhood friend Yuri reconnecting and wanting to meet up. The two had been great friends throughout their school years, and although they hadn't seen each other in over a decade, they'd been able to catch a glimpse into each other's lives by maintaining their connection through social media. Rika was excited and agreed immediately. She couldn't have known, but unfortunately this decision would end up costing her her life. Yuri had a plan to murder Rika, steal her identity, and flee the country. Yuri was born in Brazil, but was of Japanese descent. The first Japanese immigrants arrived in Brazil in 1908, and Brazil is actually home to the largest Japanese population outside of Japan. Although she was born in Brazil, Yuri moved back to Japan with her family when she was a young girl. They settled in Osaka, very close to where Rika and her family lived. The two girls went to the same school and were good friends. But after her junior high year, Yuri decided to move back to Brazil and continue her schooling there. Up until the age of 18, children are permitted to maintain dual citizenship, in this case, Japanese and Brazilian. But from 18, Japan only recognizes one citizenship, meaning that Yuri effectively had to decide between becoming a Japanese national or a Brazilian. She opted to relinquish her Japanese citizenship and become a Brazilian national. However, when she was 20, Yuri returned to Japan, and she started to regret her decision. It was decidedly more difficult to find a job and assimilate back into society in Japan now that she'd given up her Japanese citizenship. She entered the country on a temporary visa and struggled to find work, taking menial positions in supermarkets and convenience stores to get by. At this time, she was living with a Chinese roommate in Tokyo to save money. Years passed. Yuri was isolated and growing increasingly despondent. She wasn't close to her family, and her only real friend was her Chinese roommate. But in 2013, she was dealt another blow when her roommate announced that she was planning to return to China after securing a lucrative job offer in Shanghai. Desperate not to be left behind, Yuri decided that she would go to China too, at any cost. It wouldn't be easy. Yuri was in considerable debt, couldn't afford to fly to China, and crucially, she'd already been denied permanent residency in Japan. Her visa was long expired, and she was living in Japan illegally. She racked her brains, trying to think of other options, but came up short. And then she read a news story about other foreigners who had forged their passports, and decided that since she couldn't leave Japan legitimately, that might be her only way out. This is where Rika comes into the story. Through careful research, Yuri realized that there were really only two options. She needed to steal a valid passport or make one illegally. Stealing might get her into more trouble if she were caught, and she couldn't afford the payment for a forgery. She hit on a third idea, applying for a brand new passport under an assumed identity. It was with this in mind that she began scouring her Facebook friends, looking for a female around her age. It was of vital importance that the person was single and had never left Japan, meaning that they had never applied for a passport previously. After some deliberation, she targeted Rika. Rika Okada lived alone, worked as a nurse, and crucially, Yuri knew that she'd never travelled abroad. She was fairly certain, therefore, that Rika had never applied for her own passport. She used the popular Japanese messaging app Line to contact Rika in January 2014 and told her that she was now back in Japan. It had been 10 years since the girls had met up in person, and since Yuri was going to be in Osaka, she asked Rika whether she'd like to meet for dinner. Rika was surprised but happy to hear from her old friend, and the two planned to meet up in a Japanese pub in Osaka with two other former classmates from their school days. On February 1st, Rika posted a message on Facebook saying, quote, "I'm going to meet my elementary school classmates this evening. Has it really been 10 years since we met?" At dinner, she also posted a photo of the group enjoying their meal. This is Yuri on the left and Rika on the right. It was during dinner, Yuri later admitted, that she started thinking about how she could kill Rika. Rika invited her to stay the night with her, and Yuri made the 2.5-hour train journey back to Tokyo the following morning. Just over a month later, Yuri's Chinese roommate left for Shanghai. She was suddenly alone again. It was time to solidify her exit plan and escape from Japan for good. On March 20th, 2014, Rika made a cryptic Facebook post saying, quote, "I just had a very unpleasant experience and I am shaking with anger." There's been much speculation as to what triggered this. Some said that it could have been that Yuri had turned up again in Osaka and irritated Rika by demanding to stay with her. Regardless, the next day, March 21st, Yuri travelled back to Osaka and visited a local home improvement store in Rika's neighbourhood. There, she bought a large kitchen knife, which she then concealed in a bag. Uninvited, she forced herself into Rika's home and refused to leave. Rika, as many people had described, was gentle and polite, and most likely couldn't find the strength to refuse, and she allowed Yuri to stay for that night. Rika sent a text message on the morning of March 22nd to one of her friends complaining that Yuri had just showed up at her place last night and had refused to leave. Rika decided to confront Yuri one more time, hoping that she would get the message. As Rika found the courage to confront her, telling her she needed to leave, Yuri pulled out the knife, stabbing her in the stomach. It later transpired that Yuri had stabbed Rika over 50 times in a frenzied attack. She then set about trying to clean up the blood and evidence that she'd ever been in the house. She was also able, using Rika's computer, to delete the last angry posts from her account online. Finally, she sent a message from Rika's phone to her boss, saying that she was unwell and wouldn't be coming in to work today. When Rika's parents sent her text messages, Yuri would reply, pretending she was Rika and hoping to prolong anyone finding out that she was missing. When a concerned colleague from the hospital where she worked visited the house, they reported that no one was home. And subsequently, when the building landlord made contact, Yuri called back, pretending to be Rika, and said she was away on business and wouldn't be back for a while. After a week of not being able to reach their daughter, Rika's parents called the authorities and reported her missing. But Yuri was one step ahead of them. Having used Rika's phone to call in sick, she then kept it turned off most of the time. She found her wallet and credit cards, and the day after the murder, booked a moving company to come and pick up a package from Rika's home. The booking was in Rika's name and paid for with her credit card. Yuri signed the delivery paperwork as Rika, but left her own phone number as the contact. According to reports, Yuri had drained as much blood as possible and wrapped Rika's body in bubble wrap, placing it in a 6-foot-long cardboard box. The package weighed around 50 kilograms. The contents were labelled as life-size doll made of clay, and it was addressed to Rika, but sent to Yuri's own address in Tokyo. Police later found Yuri's fingerprints on the box. Yuri returned to Tokyo to wait for the package, which was scheduled to be delivered the following day. It's believed that she kept Rika's body in her apartment for a month before renting a storage locker, again using Rika's own credit card, and moving her body there in late April. Yuri applied for more credit cards in Rika's name. She also used her health card to get the official certificate required for a passport application. She applied for a passport in Rika's name, but using her own photograph. In total, she spent around 1 million yen, the equivalent of $10,000, in Japan and later in Shanghai, on hotels, clothes, and other expenses. Yuri most likely moved Rika's body to the storage facility because she was expecting her friend, an old roommate, to return from Shanghai. Once they had reunited, Yuri started to plan for her escape. She would accompany her friend when she flew back to Shanghai on May 3rd. However, things didn't go according to plan. She took the flight, but was stopped by Shanghai officials and detained for suspected illegal entry into China. Yuri said she was given consent by Rika to use the passport, but then turned herself in to the Japanese consulate and was held by the authorities. Meanwhile, back in Osaka, Rika's mother had visited her daughter's home and was shocked to discover bloodstains both on the floor matting and on the wall by her bed. They quickly discovered, via her credit card activity, the order placed for the shipment of a large package and the receipt for the storage facility in Tokyo. And this led to the discovery of Rika's remains. And, as previously mentioned, the discovery of Yuri's fingerprints on the box containing Rika's corpse undeniably placed her at the scene of the crime. Police issued a warrant for Yuri on suspicion of murder, as well as the lesser charges of robbery, credit card theft, and identity fraud. They encountered some problems initially because there is no extradition treaty between China and Japan. Unfortunately, Yuri, who had relinquished her Japanese citizenship, seemed likely to be sent back to Brazil. But the Japanese government continued to plead for her extradition to Japan. And 2 years later, in 2016, China's Supreme Court ruled that Yuri should fly back to Japan and face her charges. In January 2017, Yuri was brought back to Osaka and formally arrested. Initially, she refused to cooperate and said she had nothing to say. But later, she confessed to both the robbery and Rika's murder. Her trial took place in 2019. She pleaded guilty to Rika's murder, but her defense team was to claim that she suffered from a psychological illness. Indeed, her lawyers argued for leniency with regard to punishment on the grounds that she should not be held fully criminally liable. due to diminished mental capacity. However, prosecutors countered that many steps were taken to plan the murder, conceal the body, and prolong the discovery of Rika's disappearance, meaning that Yuri had the ability to judge good and bad behavior and was responsible for her actions. Ultimately, Yuri Oishi was sentenced to life in prison in March 2019, but appealed the judgment. The sentence was upheld by the Supreme Court, and her appeal dismissed. After receiving her sentence, Yuri issued a statement that read, "I apologize. I am sad and sorry for my actions and for causing so much trouble to so many people." And that's the conclusion of today's case. Thank you so much for watching. If you found it interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel and pressing the notification bell. That way, you'll be notified when I upload. Thank you once again for your support, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.